Hi class, this is Chris. I began this by interviewing my sister-in-law Hien, who is Vietnamese, and although she was born and raised in Louisiana, her parents moved here from Vietnam and moved to a predominantly Vietnamese-speaking neighborhood, and she practiced, as well as her parents, Vietnamese, very strong Vietnamese background and culture as she was growing up. Her parents did allow her to not only become introduced into the Vietnam background and culture, but also with American culture as well. So there wasn't a lot of stipulation on her. When making new friends, she said what really wasn't relatively hard unless the friends came to her home and having to explain why they did certain things, why they had to take their shoes off before they entered the house, and for religious beliefs or a sign of respect. The Buddhist prayer that they did before each meal or before bedtime. Things like that were a little difficult for her as a child to explain to her friends and other people who didn't necessarily understand Vietnamese culture. Hien said dating was slightly easier given the fact that she had grown up throughout the years in the same school district. So the guys that she dated in high school were already familiar with the traditions and the Vietnamese culture, when coming to the house, and so everyone really adjusted well to that culture and to their beliefs. She also stated that it got harder for her when it came to dating when she went to college. When she went to college and she moved here to Texas, this is where she stayed. And when getting into a serious committed relationship with somebody was a little bit more difficult given the fact that her family lived in Louisiana. She lived here. She would go visit her family if she didn't bring the guys that she was dating there, and her parents visited so infrequently. It was very difficult for when that moment came, when she was in a serious committed relationship, in order to have them be used to or adjust to what her family did or her family's background and culture and things like that. She married my brother a couple of years ago, and I know that when they got together originally and started dating and things became really serious, it was very important for her to allow my brother to understand her Vietnamese background and culture, and their beliefs and the things that they do. It was also very important that in the Vietnamese culture that they have her parents' blessing, and so that was the trip that they made. The stipulation also being that her parents were okay and with having a traditional American wedding, but the stipulation with that being that they would need to also have a traditional Vietnamese Buddhist ceremony, as she would have done by marrying someone within the same background and culture. My brother went along with that and was okay with it. I know that as attending this wedding was extremely interesting for my family and I. My family and I were, Southern born and raised and not really used to the Vietnamese background or Vietnamese culture, and didn't really know what to expect when it came to the wedding. And I found it very interesting when it came to the wedding, and how similar things were, but also how different things were. Even just growing up, I mean, how she grew up as opposed to how my brother and I grew up, and the rules and how similar the rules may have been, but for different reasons. You know, we grew up in a house where, you know, we had to take off our shoes before we entered the house to not get the carpet or floors dirty, whereas her family did it as a sign of respect. And you know, same thing with the wedding. I found it really interesting because in an American wedding, you know, the groom will purchase gifts for the guys at his wedding party. Whereas when we went to the Buddhist ceremony at my sister-in-law's house, we ended up all having to wear traditional Buddhist and Vietnamese outfits and clothing. And then in the wedding party, we kneeled before the bride and groom and presented gifts to them. And then after the ceremony, we also engaged into a Buddhist prayer of you know, in order to unite the two families together. And then right after that, we went to a Buddhist temple and had a Buddhist ceremony. And so everything was really interesting, and you know, I consider myself extremely lucky when it came to, you know, being able to experience things like that. I do believe that interpersonal relationships can be affected by a cultural difference, you know, and by interviewing my sister-in-law and finding out about her traditional Vietnamese background and culture, I found out, you know, things about her culture and my culture, and again, like I just said, the way that we were raised, on how different things may have been, or more complex depending on the, you know, backgrounds, but also on how similar things were as well. So, you know, I'm extremely happy that my sister-in-law's parents are extremely understanding to my family, who, you know, have taken a lot of time to get to know the Vietnamese culture and the things that they do and the things that they don't do, and you know, and it's not just, you know, because, you know, they're being, you know, picky. It's because, you know, this is what they believe and this is what happens. You know, I also know that, you know, during the wedding ceremonies, we weren't able to, now I didn't find this out until much later. I wasn't involved in taking pictures, but and it all came clear to me too, but later on when my brother and sister-in-law had a baby, her parents came into town, and we weren't able to take a picture with just 3 people in it. It had to be either less than 3 or more than 3. And this is a very, very, very strong belief in the Vietnamese and Buddhist culture, that, you know, and I'm still not entirely clear, I can't even talk, clear on why that is, but that is something that I found very interesting as well. So I'm extremely grateful for the family that I have. I'm extremely grateful to have my sister-in-law in my life, and to allow this course and this opportunity and this assignment to really gain a little bit more knowledge and understanding about her culture and her background and the way she was raised. So I hope this was good enough, and I you know, wish my classmates good luck on their assignments as well. So and I can't wait to see y'all's videos as well. So have a good night.